All right, good afternoon, everyone. I don't hear nobody. Good afternoon, everyone. Amen. Glory be to God. All right, so for those of you guys that are joining, maybe joining here for the first time, we're actually at the tail end of our current series titled Love Lies. So this is week 4. So the past several weeks where we've been talking about our lies and misconceptions that we have when it comes to relationships and when it comes to dating and even marriage, which we talked about last week. And what we said the first week was that whatever we believe impacts how you live. Your belief impacts how you live. So even if that's a lie, because we looked at the example of Adam and Eve, how Eve, she was lied by the devil, and as a result of that impacted how she lived and the consequences of those sins. Same thing in real life. You know, if you think about Hitler, it was based on a belief that a certain group of people were more important. And as a result of his belief, even though it was a lie, resulted in one of the biggest, led to a lot of death within people. So our main verse, our theme verse for this whole series that we've been looking at, and I hope you've memorized it by now, I've been saying it every week, is Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. And God is screaming, and he's saying, my people, my children are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. My people, my children are being destroyed for the lack of knowledge. And when you think about relationship, we have a lot of misconceptions. When we think about dating, what it means to be single, what it means to be married, what is my role as a husband, what is my role like as a wife? We all have misconceptions. We all have different lies based on what we've seen. And as a result of that, we saw how the divorce rate at about a 45% rate, marriages that have fallen as a result of what we believe and how we treat one another. Week 1, what we looked at was one of the lies was about singleness. When we look at people when they're single, I don't care if they're in their 20s or their 30s, and even in their 40s. People look at people that are single and say, you are a failure. You haven't been married yet. And we put so much pressure to get people married. We look at singleness as a failure. But we saw how that is way far from the truth. Because St. Paul, our patron saint, he was single. He was never married. And we will never say that his life was a failure. But what we said, the truth when it comes to singleness, is a gift that God has given us. It's a gift, unfortunately, a lot of people don't like to open. We neglect that season of our life because we're constantly chasing a relationship. But it's a gift that God has given us with a purpose, the purpose of building our foundation and our relationship with him. Week 2, the lie that we looked at about was dating. When it comes to dating is hard. Dating is rough. I hear different stories and why is it so hard? But I think what we believe, that when it comes to dating, we believe that dating is harmless. Dating is something for me to do on a weekend. Like, fill in my schedule. I'll date that person. I'll have multiple girls or guys that I'm dating at a certain time. And we think that dating is harmless. But what we said was dating is something. It's a road that leads us to marriage. There's a lot of people that date, that are in a relationship with no intention of being married. Why are you in a relationship if you do not have the intention to get married? So what we said was dating is a road, a path, a transportation that leads us to marriage. It's not a playground for us to play. That's for kids. That's why we say when you date, be intentional about your dating. Last week, we looked at marriage. There's a lot of misconception when it comes to marriage, what marriage is. People look at marriage and they think marriage, people are miserable. There are young people that are saying, I don't want to get married because of what I see in people. My parents and things that I've seen, that I've witnessed. The divorce, the high divorce rate, which is at a 45% rate, if not more. And people look at that and we say, marriage doesn't work. Marriage doesn't work. But the truth, what we said was, the problem isn't marriage. The problem isn't marriage, because marriage is a sacrament that is created by God. But the problem is, what instruction are we following when it comes to marriage? Marriages fail not because marriage doesn't work. Marriages fail because we try to do it our own ways, based on what we've seen in our parents, which may not always be true, which may not be always biblically. We see based on celebrities or movies that we see, we try to do marriage that way. And marriages fail, not because there's something wrong with marriage, but because we ignore the manual. We ignore the instruction that God has given us, and we try to do it on our own. We said that marriage is a sacrament. Marriage is a sacrament. Sometimes we forget that. We think it's just a checklist. We think it's a milestone for us to hit. You know, you go to school, you go to college, now I have to get married. Marriage is a sacrament within the church. And it's not about happiness. And what we said last week, we think marriage is to make me happy. Any of the sacraments that we partake, it's not to make us happy, but it's unity with God. All the sacraments, and marriage is no different. It's the unity with God. Marriage should lead me to a life of salvation with Christ, just like all the other sacraments. And we said a marriage is a covenant that we make, a promise that we make in front of God, and not a contract. So that was the past 3 weeks, and if you've missed the first 3 weeks, you know, I encourage you guys to truly, especially week 1, that's like the foundation. If you missed week 1, I encourage you to really focus on week 1, because last week we were talking about marriage. Today we're going to talk about marriage. So we can't talk about marriage, or you can't learn about marriage if you've missed the first week, which is a life of singleness. So before we get started for today, I'm very excited for the season that we're about to embark in. You guys know what that season is? The guys probably know. Are you guys excited about anything? Football is back. The greatest football team, the Washington Commanders, right? I'm very excited to see what they're going to do based on what they did last year. If you guys know me, I'm a huge fan of football. So I'm very excited for football to be back. And I'm a huge fan of the Commanders as well. So if you guys don't know, let me give you a little history about the Commanders. Last year, I feel like we won the Super Bowl. I know we didn't. We were one game away. But it was one of the greatest teams. But before that, we were a terrible team. We were the laughing stock of the NFL. But I still watched. It's it's a covenant that I was in with the Commanders or the Redskins or the Washington football. We had more name changes than playoff wins. But something happened the last year. What happened last year? Huh? Jaden Daniels, okay, not him, but yeah, he's the player, but what else happened? Huh? Women are like, okay, you lost us. Okay, I'll talk to the guys. What happened? He's just raising his hand. Okay. What happened is we had a new ownership, right? We had a new ownership. We had an ownership that knew his role was to own a team. He's not knowledgeable about football. He just has money. And then he hired a GM, which is a general manager, that does the drafting, kind of has an idea about a football, hires the right coach, right? And then we had a coach that knew how to strategize and how to coach. Unfortunately, the last owner that we've had for 20 plus years, I'm supposed to be nice to that guy, so I'll say nice things about him. He was the owner. He wanted to be the GM. He wanted to be the coach. And I'm thinking he probably wanted to be the quarterback as well. He wished he could play. The previous owner didn't understand what his role was. But whereas the new owner, the team that is winning, the team that went from 0 playoff wins to almost winning the Super Bowl last year, it was a result of everybody understanding their role. If you think about any successful organization, everybody plays their role. When everybody understands their role, that organization is successful. Think about your school. You have a principal. You have your teachers. You have your janitors. You have your counselors, your PE teacher. Everybody understands their role. The company that you work for, you have your CEO. The CEO doesn't try to do what the accountants does or what the marketing department does because they understand their role. For a team to be successful, we all need to understand our role. When it comes to marriage, do we understand our role? Do we accept our role? God has given the man, the husbands, specific roles. Do you understand your role? The wives, God has given each of you your role as a wife. Do you understand your role? Think of roles not in competition, but they complete one another. Think of a puzzle, right? Puzzles, you have a lot of pieces. Is the top puzzle piece more important than the bottom piece or the corner piece? What is the most important piece of that puzzle? Every piece is needed for that puzzle to work. Marriage, our roles are not in competition. God designed our roles. God gave us specific roles for us to win in marriage, not to compete. Why does the husband have this role? Why does the wife get to do that? Why is her role that way? It's not a competition. If you want to win in marriage, we have to understand our role. Marriage, think of it as a team. Like my wife and I, we wear the same jersey. We're on a team. And that is the reflection of marriage. Sometimes we have such a high divorce rate because people in marriage, they compete one another. They don't wear the same jersey. And we say, why does marriage fail? When we neglect our role, when we don't understand our role as the husband, our role as the wife, that is why we have a 45% divorce rate. This is where society has failed us. I truly believe our role is the reason why society has failed in marriage. We look at the husband, and we think as a husband, and I've talked to men, they think it's about authority. We think it's about my way. I am the leader. I am the head of the household. What I say goes in this house. But is that how God designed it? Women look at their role and they say, well, God gave us no voice. We have nothing to say. We're just supposed to submit. We're supposed to be a doormat. And we say Christianity, and I've seen videos, Christianity is trying to oppress women based on the role that God has given you. We say that marriage, like our roles, is outdated. We treat marriage like our biblical roles as like an app in your phone that needs to be updated based on in 2025. Is one role more important than the other? Is the husband's role more important than the wife? Or is the wife's role more important than the husband's? Society has drawn this thing where we're supposed to compete. But marriage, a relationship, according to God's design, is supposed to be, you get to select your team. You get to select like who you want to be in this covenant with. But we get into marriage and we neglect our role, or we don't understand our role. Is that God's design when it came to male and female? Like, we're different. Let's be honest. Like, males, women, like, we're different. That's okay. We talk differently. We relax differently. We think differently. Because that's how God created us. Male and female, like, we're two different people. Like, my wife, like, I can hang out with the guys. Like, we never look at each other when we talk. Right, guys? Like, you never look eye to eye. Like, I'm talking to my wife. She wants me to look at her. I can't look away. We're different. That's okay. And our roles are different, and that's okay because God gave us different roles based on who we were. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, God said, there is neither a Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. In God's eyes, we are equal. We're the same, like we're equal. One is not more important than the other. Don't look at the role and say, why does the husband do that? Why does the wife have to be this? Then we're in competition. We're not on a team. You let the devil enter into that marriage, into that relationship. We can fight all we want, which is what society has done against God's word, against God's given biblical rules. We can fight all we want against it, but we would have a 45% divorce rate. We would have a 45% divorce rate. So if you want to win in marriage, this is what we have to do. And our main point for today, the success of your marriage will depend on your ability to understand. And I didn't stop there. Not just understand, but to embrace your God-given role. You want your marriage to be successful. Not just understand, but accept it. Embrace it. Say, that is my role. Maybe I'm not there yet, but that is my goal. To be what God has called me to be. To submit, because that's what God has told me to do. To love as Christ, because that is what God has called me to be. If you want your marriage to be successful, not just understand it, but embrace it. Saying, that is my goal. I'm going to accept my role. Let me clarify. So when we talk about roles, I'm not talking about who washes dishes, who does the laundry, who takes out the trash, or who cooks and cleans, whatever. Those are chores. That's what kids do. That's not a marriage thing. That's for childish. Remember the love chapter, what St. Paul said. When I grew up, when I became a man, I put childish things away. Roles has nothing to do with who cooks and cleans, who does the laundry. We can get kids to do that. That's not a marriage thing. So that is not what we're going to talk about today. But we're going to talk about is what is God's given biblical role for me as a husband, according to the Bible, according to his word. What is my role as a wife, according to what God has called me to be? So I'll summarize our role, and then we're going to divide it. We're going to start with the guys, and we're going to go to the women. So every husband is called to be like Christ. Every husband, whatever your roles are in the Bible, there's different things. But at the end of the day, we are called to be like Christ, and every wife is called to be like the church. Don't worry about any of the roles. Women, you're called to be the church. Men, you're called to be Christ. Remember last week, we ended where marriage is compared to Christ and the church, that relationship, that covenant. So the husband plays the role of the Christ, whereas the wife plays the role of the church. The church and Christ, are they in competition? They complement each other. They're not in competition. So marriage, our roles is not to compete. Based on what we know, do we have any problem with our role now? Husband, to be like Christ. Do you not, anybody want to say, no, I don't want that role? Women, like when you look at your role, to be like the church, any problem with that? So that is our role in general. So we're going to break it down. I have 1.5 rule for the guys and then just 1 for the ladies. Because St. Paul spends about 7 verses talking to the guys. And I think there's a reason for that. And then only about a couple verses for the ladies. So husbands, your biblical role is sacrifice and give as Christ did. Sacrifice and give as Christ did. Based on Ephesians chapter 5, if we go to the next verse, or next slide, there you go. Husband's role is to sacrifice and give as Christ did. Very important. Like circle, as Christ did. That is your role. You're called to be like Christ. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, husbands, love your wives. I prefer to use sacrifice because love, we've diminished that word. Like we love I love you, like you love this girl today, you love another girl tomorrow. Like, but sacrifice. Love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Fellas, that is your role. I want you to repeat after me. I will I don't hear nothing. I will sacrifice. I can't hear. I need to sacrifice louder. He's louder than everybody here. I will sacrifice and give like Christ. That is your role. That is your God-given role. When you get into marriage, this is your expectation, that you would give and sacrifice like Christ did. Love, again, I don't like to use the word love. Love, we think, is like about feelings. Love is a verb. Love is a verb that God used. He didn't tell us that he loved us. What did he do? He showed us that he loved us. He showed us his love by coming down from the glory, from his throne, coming down in humility. That is love. Love is an action. It's not a feeling. It's not what we say, but it's what we do. So this is the type of love that you are expected to hold on to in your relationship, in your marriage. But as men, like, we've been trained. Like, as men, we're pretty much trained based on performance. If you think about, for any of us that have played sports, the better I perform, I get to play varsity, or I get to get a scholarship, is based on performance. We think love in the same way, that is based on performance. Think of your school. Think of school, or even in your job. The harder that I work, the better the reward is. And we think that's how a relationship should work. Love, sacrifice, is not based on your wife's performance. God, when he died for us, was it because we were good? Was it because based on our performance? Because in Romans, we learned that Christ died for us while we were still sinners. So the love that God has called us to be is not based on what the wives do. You are called to love based on your God-given commandment. If your love for your wife depends on her actions, that is not Christ-like love. If you think you get into a relationship and your love will be based on how she makes you feel, what she does for you, that is not Christ-like love. Remember, he said, husbands, love your wives as Christ. That's the key word, as Christ, not based on performance. I would argue, maybe I'm a man, this role is harder. We'll get to the wives' role. I would say this is the harder role. Because how did Christ love the church? How are we supposed to love? Christ loved when people were slapping his face. That is what you're called to do. If your wife smacks you, you love her. If your wife stabs you, you love her. You're supposed to lay your life for your wife. That is our calling. That is a very hard calling. But do we understand that? Do we understand our role as a husband before we get into a marriage, before we get into a covenant? We have a high divorce rate because we get into a covenant and we don't love. We love based on performance. I'm not happy, so let me walk out. She's not making me feel good, so I don't love her anymore. We fell out of love. I don't even know what that means. This is how we would be judged. As Christians, God will ask us, did you love your wife as I loved you? That is the measure of judgment. In marriage, husbands, is understanding that our wives are more important than us. Because Christ, he gave up his throne. He died for us because we were more important to him. We were his children. And we're called to love as he loved. So what are you willing to sacrifice? Man, we say things like, and don't believe these things lies. I will swim across the ocean for you, or I will die for you. That probably will never happen. There's no ocean that he's going to swim across the ocean for you. But guys, would you give up your video game to spend time with your wife because she needs your attention at that time? Would you stop watching a football game because your wife needs you to serve? Would you unfollow somebody that she's not comfortable with the person that you're following? Don't tell me you will die for her, but will you do these simple things? Will you get up and wash the dishes because she needs you? Will you give up a business that's hurting your marriage? A business that's taking the father away from his kids. Would you sacrifice that for your wife? I'm going to do a little twist here. I love football. Will you give up your fantasy football team because it's taken so much time away from your marriage? That's something I had to personally give up. It was hard. But it takes so much time. Don't tell me you will swim across the ocean. But will you give up these small things for the sake of your wife? Are you willing to sacrifice the smallest thing, day to day, for the sake of your wife? Love is not what we say. It's what we do. It's with our actions. Being like the husband, it's not about authority. It's not about power. It's not saying my way or the highway. It's not sitting there and giving orders. I'm the head. Imagine, think about your workplace. Think about your workplace. Will you work for a manager that works alongside with you? Or a manager that says, I'm a manager. Do this, and have it to me by 4 p.m. That gives out orders. Nobody would want to work for that manager. But we want to work for people that work alongside with us. That is what marriage is for the husband. It's not authority. It's not power. Christ had all the power in the world, but he came in humility and gave his life for us. There's a beautiful summary from St. John Chrysostom that summarizes what our role is. And pay attention to what he said. To the husbands, do you want the wife to be obedient to you, as the church is to Christ? Then take upon yourself the same providential care for her as Christ takes for the church. And even if it becomes necessary for you to give your life for her, yes, and to be, pay attention, cut into pieces 10,000 times, and to endure and suffer any hardship whatever, do not refuse it. Even though you should undergo all of this, you will not have done anything equal to what Christ has done for you. That is your role. Husbands, who wants to get married? Everybody want to get married? That is your role. Don't rush into marriage if you can't do this. Don't rush into a relationship if you can't uphold what you're called to do based on God. That is your first role, is to love and to sacrifice. I wasn't going to talk about this role, but I felt like it was a need. So your next role, and it's going to be a lot shorter, is to be a leader. To lead like Christ by living under his authority. Men, we think we are leaders in the house. That we're supposed to be the leader of the house. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3. It said, but I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ. The head of every man is Christ. We ignore this part, and we go to the next part. The head of women is man, and the head of Christ is God. Don't focus that you are the head of the women. Don't focus that you have authority over the women. Focus on that first part. Who is your head? It's Christ. Have you submitted to the headship of Christ? Or are you worried about being the head, the leader? Listen to me, my way. Is it Christ that leads you? Or is it your career? Or is it money? Because what did Joshua say? He said, as for me and my house, we will praise God. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Husbands, men, who are you serving? Who are you serving? Don't say that you are the head of the household if your headship hasn't submitted to Christ. As men, as husbands, how often do we say we're going to confession? We need to go and take Holy Communion. How often do our kids see us reading our Bible as a family? How often are we leading our home to church? I believe that marriages fail. And I know a lot of people, and it starts with the men. Marriages fail because men, we fail in our biblical roles. We are so busy with our career. We're so busy trying to do everything else outside of the house that we neglect to be the head in the household. By submitting to Christ, bringing my family to the church. A godly husband must balance his work, his home, and his spiritual life. On our wedding day, I always think about this. God gives you the big responsibility. He gives you his daughter. He gives you his daughter and say, now you're responsible to keep her in the faith, to lead her to the church. But how many times, as Cassie even said it earlier, every time we come to liturgy, the women's side is full. Men's barely. We as men, we have to do better in our role, in our God-given role. Our lesson is the problem in marriage today isn't that we have too many women who don't want to submit. The problem is that we have too many men who don't want to submit to the headship of Jesus. I truly believe in my heart, based on the people that I know, that are around me, marriages fail because, men, we fail in our responsibility to submit to the headship of Christ. If we do nothing, we'll get nothing. But if we accept our role, if we embrace our role, we can change that narrative. So what are some practical examples of how to love your wife? Excuse me. What are some practical examples how to love your wife? So I think I have 5 things that you can do. So I think the next slide, all right. Learn her love language, all right? Learn your wife's love language. There's a book by Gary Chapman, and he wrote on the 5 love languages. Understand that we are different. Male and female, we're very different. How I like to be loved is very different. Excuse me. How I like to be loved is very different from the way that my wife likes to be loved. So understand, what does my lady, what does my wife need? How does she like to be loved? He talks about these 5 different things, and I'll go through them very quickly. Words of affirmation. Learn how to compliment your wife. Learn, I don't care if you've been married 2 years, 5 years, or 20 years. Learn to compliment your wife. Like me, I could stand here and talk for days. When it comes to complimenting my wife, you look good, babe. And I don't have the verbs. I don't have a lot to say. So we have to learn how to use our words. Like men by nature, we don't have a lot of words. We don't know what to say. Compliment your wife. Acts of service. Acts of service. Show her that you love her through your action. Be a helper in the house. Cook a meal, run errands. Your job is to make her life easier. And you say, what can I do to make her life easier today? That should be the question that we ask every day. Receiving gifts. Man, don't be cheap. Like, love costs, right? Don't be cheap. Buy your wife, like, we're supposed to, like, acts of service, like some of them like gifts. Buy her flowers. It's not the flowers that make her happy. You know what makes her happy? Is that you took time to think about her, to stop at a place, get those flowers, inconvenience your, like, route to your home, and you brought her flowers. It's not the flowers, but that you thought about her. But you could also do things for free. You could send her a random text message thinking about you. That costs you nothing, but it means a lot to the wives. Random notes. That's one of my favorite things. I'm very cheap, like I told you week one. I like random notes, and I put it like in her gym bag or like in their car. So when she, like, it makes her happy. Quality time. Quality time. Not watching football. Giving her your undivided attention. This is something I personally need to work on and continue to work on. But it's sitting down and saying, how was your day? And giving her your undivided attention. Putting away your phone. Putting away your email. Your business. Whatever it is. Putting that away and giving your wife undivided attention. Last one, physical touch. This is not sex. All right? Outside of sex. Physical touch means like sitting next to her. Holding her hands in public. Making her feel like you appreciate her. Hugs. My wife loves that. This is one of her love language. Is physical touch and act of service, right? So she likes hugs. So I'm trying to do a better job of giving her a hug in the morning. Like even when I'm rushing, stopping. Like I don't care how busy we are, just stop and give her a hug. So those are different ways. So learn the love language of your wife because everybody's different. So that's the guys. All right, the wives. I was scared about this. My wife told me be careful. So I saved the best for last. Your role, your God-given role, not me, not according to what I said, but your role is to submit with a willing heart as the church does to Christ. That is your role, is to submit with a willing heart. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, we read, he said, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Submit to your husbands as to the Lord. So ladies, repeat after me. I will. I can't hear nothing. Y'all louder than that. I will. I still don't hear nothing. I will submit. Say like you're proud. Say submit. Submit to my husband. Why are y'all laughing? I see some people that are engaged and that are not saying it. So we're going to say it again. Say, I will submit to my husband. Do you mean it? Would you guys submit? We hate this word, don't we? Let's be honest. We hate the word submission. Submit to these guys, like why? This one verse in the Bible turns people away from Christianity. People refuse to accept Christianity based on one verse, where the wives are told, given the command by God to submit to their husbands. The challenge today in society is, do we accept what the culture tells us? Or do we accept the Word of God as it is? Not that we think it needs to be updated, but as it's written. Culture tells us it's about independence. There's music about it. There's all types of things. It's all about independence. Women and independence. That's not what marriage is. Marriage is not like independence. For the guys and for the girls, we depend on each other. Marriage is a team where I have a part, you have a part. We're not in competition. The word submission, like to submit, is one of the, again, biggest thing that is misunderstood within Christianity. Submission, when it comes to the wives, is not blindly following your husband into sin. We saw the example of Irenaeus in the book of Acts chapter 5, where the wife blindly followed Irenaeus that led to her death. That is not biblical submission. That is not what God has called us to do. Submissive is not being inferior in any way. Because we read the verse earlier in Galatians. Just because you have to submit doesn't mean you're lower than the husband or the husband is higher than the wives. We are all one in Christ. We're equal. Don't think of submission that you're lower than your husband. Like I said, think about the puzzle piece. Just because there's a puzzle piece on the top and there's a puzzle piece on the corner and the bottom doesn't mean one is more important than the other. Every piece is needed for that puzzle to work. Every role within marriage is needed for us to accept and embrace for that marriage to work. We hear submit. We hear submission. And we say the church is against women. The church is trying to oppress women. But is the church against women? Is the church against women? If you think about where this verse, book of Ephesians, when it was written, before Christ, women had no voice at all. Women were treated as the bottom of the pole. Like, women were considered nothing. But it's only in the church when Christ came that women had voice. Women had power. Women had something to say when Christ came into the world. Pre-Christ, women had no voice, no rights. But it's the church that changed that. But we let culture say the church is trying to oppress women. Learn the history of the church. Learn the history of the church. Women had their right when church started. But it's submission. Think about submission. If we read the New Testament, is that only for the women? Is that only for the wives? In the book of Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, before St. Paul starts talking about marriage, in verse 21, he said, submitting to one another in the fear of God. We're called to submit to one another. Do we have a problem with submission there? The word submission. As Christians, we're called to submit. You know what's hard? It's for me to submit somebody that I don't know. But somebody that I chose to be in a covenant with, and a relationship with, that has the best interest for me, submission is nothing. But we're called to submit to one another. I think that's a higher calling than submitting to your husband. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5, we see this another word, submission. He said, likewise, you younger people, submit yourself to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another. Is the church against young people? Is the church trying to oppress young people? No parent. Parents love this verse. Submit to me. But wives, why do we have a problem when it comes to submitting to our husbands? Submission, the word submission, is about humility. Wives, within marriage, you're called to submit to the person that you decided to be on the same team with. You select who you submit to within marriage. We've been told that submission is about weaker, being lower, being oppressed. Don't believe the lies. Don't believe the misconceptions. That is why we have a high divorce rate. Submission is not about subordination or losing your voice, your identity. The word submission in Greek is a voluntary, like yielding in love to the person that you chose. It's a voluntary, like in the Greek word, the word submission, it means like you're voluntary submitting. Because your marriage, it's based on your will, said, I want to be married. I want to be in a covenant with this man. But you're voluntarily submitting to your husband. A husband, their role is to lay down their life for your sake. a husband is called to be cut into 10,000 pieces for his wife, would you not want to submit to that husband? When you think about submission, you're submitting to somebody that is willing to lay down his life for you. If you think about it, Jesus, he never asked us to do something that he would not do. When he said love to the husbands, he died on the cross. This is how I love. When he said submit, in the book of John chapter 6, he said, for I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Jesus, he submitted his will to the Father. Before his crucifixion, he had a hard time. He said, take this cup away from me. But he submitted to the will of the Father. Jesus submitted. You know who did it? Satan. He didn't submit. So you choose. Wife's role, again, plays the role of the church. In the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, at the end of St. Paul, after he talks about the husband's role, talks about the wife's role, he does a summary at the end, and this is what he said. He said, therefore, just as the church is subject, being submission to Christ, let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Would we read this verse and say the church is oppressed? Would we read this verse and say the church is oppressed? They're one. The church and Christ. It's not about lower and higher, but they're united as one. That's why I would say a wife's submission isn't weakness. It's a God-given way to reflect the church. A wife's submission to her husband is not a sign of weakness, but you get to play the role of the church. As we're in the middle of the Virgin Mary fast, you get to be like the Virgin Mary. You get to be like the Virgin Mary. Our head priest earlier, he was talking about the Virgin Mary and the role that she played, how much she's honored. It's because she submitted to the will of Christ. You get to be like the Virgin Mary. She was the first church because she hosted Christ inside of her. So your role in submission is to be like the church, to be just like the Virgin Mary. When we think of it that way, do we have a problem with submission? So what is one practical way? Could have thought about different things, but one thing that you can show that you submitted, that you were in submission to your husband, is to respect him with your words. That's a practical thing that you can practice. To respect your man, to respect your husband with what you say. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33, St. Paul said, let the wife see that she respects her husband. Let the wife respect her husband. And man, the husband, their need is respect. Your words matter. What you say matters. Avoid belittling your husband. What you say to your husband, privately, but more importantly, publicly. In your groups, what do you say about your husband? And Proverbs 31 is a really good Proverbs to read for especially how to be a virtuous wife, how to be a wife. and reads, she opens her mouth, talking about the wife, with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. Wives, do we use words that build our husbands or tear him down? Do we encourage our husbands or do we tear them down? Johanna, my daughter, one day randomly, she said, she came up to me and she's 4. She said, Dada, you make the best shuttle. She thinks I make the best shuttle. And it made me smile because I know where she got it from. It's because she heard my wife saying it. For those of you that know, my wife is like a chef. So I don't make the best shuttle, but she encourages me. She uses words to build me up, and my daughter sees that. And it makes me want to do more. But imagine if all I heard was, you missed the salt, or you didn't do this right, it's too watery. I'm telling you, when I first started cooking, eggs, simple as eggs, it was burnt. But my wife, she ate it. But she used ways to encourage me to cook. But I'm telling you, if she said to me, these are terrible, if I never got even when it's bad, she used words to encourage me. As a result of that, I love cooking. I don't make a lot of food, but I could survive. But it's about the words that she uses. Do you use the word to build your man? Or do you use words to tear him down? In Proverbs, it talks about how life and death are in the power of the tongue. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Ladies, how are you using your tongue? Are you giving life to your husband? Or is it death to your husband? Like I said, you play the role of the church. The church is full of imperfect people. Your husband will not be perfect. We are not perfect. We make mistakes. There's a lot of things that we need to learn. But your husband deserves to be respected. Your husband deserves to be respected. Do you know why? Because you want to be loved even when you're not your best. When you don't have your best day, when you don't have your best moment, you want to be loved. In the same way, the husbands want to be respected, even when we're not the perfect people. So again, I'll conclude. Marriage is a reflection of Christ and the church. The husbands, your role is to play the role of Christ by sacrificing and giving as Christ did. And the wives, you play the role of the church to submit to your husbands. Marriage, we get to win in marriage. Marriages succeed when we embrace our role, when we accept our role, and we embrace them. We can win. Marriage roles, like I said, are not easy. Marriage roles are not, it's not easy to be like Christ. It's not easy to submit. But we need to embrace our role and understand that what Christ has given us are those that he knows that we can do, that we can achieve. Because all things that Christ has given us are possible when Christ is the foundation of our marriage. Glory be to God.